Hey everyone, you are watching the DMZ America Podcast for Friday, June 20th, the first day of summer 2025. Things are getting hotter in the Middle East. Coming to you from the left, I'm political cartoonist Ted Rall.
And I'm editorial cartoonist Scott Stantis, coming to you from the right. Yeah, it feels like it's been summer for a while. By the way, are you getting eaten alive there in New York City by bugs?
Not today, but I have about a month ago, I started getting mosquito. I have a courtyard outside my bedroom, and I think there's stagnant water there, and the mosquitoes were coming in and just swarming me at night. I read that mosquitoes don't fly if it's under like 64 degrees. So I dropped the AC, I closed the windows, dropped the AC, and indeed they were grounded by air traffic control. And they became as ineffectual as a bone.
Did that work?
And so I'm okay for now. But
wow.
The big advantage of living in New York City is supposed to be that there's no nature.
Well, but you got that big god awful park,
Central Park.
Yeah, it's got trees and critters, and
it does. Although the critter thing, there's more critters than there used to be, Scott. I remember. Maybe about 20 years ago, there was quite a hullabaloo in Central Park because someone saw a raccoon and they called the police. The SWAT team came.
Of course it did.
But now
sent it to a jail in El Salvador.
But there's actually been a lot more wildlife lately. I mean, for example, in the Bronx, there have been reports of coyotes entering the Bronx and even crossing the river, the bridge into northern Manhattan. Certainly, turkeys are not unheard of in Manhattan. Certainly in Riverside Park on the Upper West Side. So we have some nature. We have some snowy egrets. We have a lot of falcons.
You do.
Falcons,
well, you know why?
Because falcons
falcons
eat rats.
They eat rats, and more. A peregrine actually will only eat something out of the sky, which is fascinating to me. And there was a church near us in Old Town in Chicago. And it had St. Mike's, and it had a ton, and Ted, I mean a ton of pigeons. It was horrible. And then all of a sudden, this male. What? Nobody loves pigeons.
I do. I think they're dapper. They're dapper birds, and they also they deal with the trash that we generate. They're clean. They're clean. They're cleaner birds. They're helping us.
No, they're not. They're out to get us, and you know this.
That's the thing about you right-wingers. You see threats everywhere.
The peregrine falcons moved into St. Mike's, just behind the statue of St. Mike, above the entrance to the church. And within just less than a month, there were no more pigeons.
I have seen pigeons intercepted by falcons in midair, and it is a sight to behold.
It is. It's pretty amazing. So anyway, that's where we are. So today's topic, for if anyone's interested.
Oh, they're interested. They're here. I can see them. Hi, guys. Thanks for joining us. Please share, follow, subscribe, donate, all the important things.
We're begging you.
You know what to do.
Begging you. You know what the right thing to do is. You know it in your heart.
You do.
Wasn't that Goldwater's slogan? In your heart, you know he's right.
Yes, it's a double entendre. Because he was, right.
Oh, okay.
Oh, I assumed you knew that.
Well, it makes sense, but I was always kind of blinded by the Democratic response to, and they had a great campaign button that, like I said, it was in your heart, you know he's right. Mm-hmm. The Democrats came back with in your guts, you know he's nuts.
I don't think they ever made that into a button, though.
Oh yeah, it is. Absolutely,
is it?
Absolutely.
You have it?
Yes, I do not, but I know you. I've seen it a million times. Yeah. In your guts, you know he's nuts, which is, I guess, is applicable today. One of the things I would venture to say, perhaps one of the only things that Ted and I liked about Donald Trump and his runs in 16, 20, and 24 is he is probably the most adamantly anti-war candidate, I'd say maybe ever, in the history of the country. And that appeals to Ted. It appeals.
Well, let's just say who succeeded.
Well, right. I mean, I'm trying to think of those who succeeded, but I'm trying to think of any candidate who ran as an anti-war candidate. Yeah, you're right. I mean, obviously George McGovern in 72.
Bring the troops home.
William Jennings Bryan, who was actually an anti-war advocate, and you know what? He was right.
Woodrow Wilson pretended to be.
Yeah, well, yeah, until he won re-election and then fucked everybody over, which is kind of Woodrow Wilson's MO. You know, when they talk about removing his name from buildings, I'm thinking, not just that, not just dragging us into World War I, which we had no business being involved in, but particularly the fact that he didn't just love in like a platonic, friendly way. He loved Jim Crow laws. People forget that Woodrow Wilson was born and raised in, say it with me, kids, South Carolina, the proud cradle of the Confederacy, and brought all of that up. I don't care if he was president of Princeton or governor of New Jersey. He was still a Southern boy at heart and thought those colored people should be kept in their place, and signed every piece of Jim Crow legislation that passed his slimy, dirty, filthy desk.
He might fit in well in today's Trump administration, considering that Trump quite grotesquely was saying nasty things about Juneteenth. I mean, you know, he's like.
Did he say it publicly? What did he say?
Yesterday
Okay,
he said that, you know, people.
Hard to keep up, man.
What's with these non-working holidays? You know, we're not going to make America great again if we just don't work. But, you know, he doesn't say that about other holidays. He only says that about, you know, the black one.
Sure. Well, and of course, that's a wink and a nod, isn't it? This is the same guy. You heard the reports of what he said when he was setting up his military parade. He didn't want to see any cripples or amputees. It's just like, yeah, because that never happens in war. Because when you're Corporal Bone Spurs, you don't really know what the price of war is. But when he ran as a candidate, he certainly knew that war is stupid. It's wasteful, which it's both, for treasure, for life. It's just a dumb thing. But Ted, now all of a sudden, he's given a 2-week ultimatum to Iran to, quote, unconditionally surrender. Now, surrender to whom and what precisely they're going to surrender, well, that's up for debate, apparently. I mean, he says things that are so flamingly stupid. But this is on the flamingly stupid meter of 1 to 10, of which Donald Trump reaches a 9 on a daily basis. This is pretty much a 13. I mean, so let's begin with that. Do you have any idea what he's fucking talking about at all?
Well, what do you mean?
When he said Iran is going to have to unconditionally surrender, I don't know what that means. So,
I mean, obviously, look, the Trump administration is weighing war against Iran, but this is not like a traditional war of conquest, right? I don't think Donald Trump or anyone around him is discussing, you know, actual unconditional surrender in the way that you and I, as students of history, understand it, as used famously during World War II when the Allies demanded that the Axis powers unconditionally surrender. That's what
we'll go back to the Civil War. General Grant, in his first, when he was faced with defeating a Confederate army, they said, "What are your terms of surrender?" And he wrote back saying, "Unconditional. You just surrender,
just capitulate," right? So yeah. you lay down arms, and then we will dictate the terms as the victors. That's not what anyone, basically, like there's no need on the part of the United States to overthrow the government of Iran, to do anything to them. I mean, what is this all about? It's a dispute about whether Iran should have a nuclear power program that might become a nuclear weapons program. And right. So what Trump means by unconditional surrender is you come to the negotiating table again, you stop insisting on any right to enrich plutonium, you agree not to have a nuclear power program completely. That's unconditional surrender as far as the United States and the Trump administration is concerned. I think part of the problem for Trump, and he is stuck between a rock and a hard place right now with his ally Israel, is that Israel has a different agenda. Israel is interested in regime change in Iran. They've said so. They've threatened to assassinate Ayatollah Khamenei, the supreme leader of Iran. They view Iran as an existential threat. Obviously, Iran's not an existential threat to the United States. So the only thing Trump wants is basically for the Iranians to agree not to have a nuclear program. And I think that would be, if the Iranians were to agree to that, which they're not, but let's just say they were, I think Trump would declare victory and go home.
I don't see why I don't understand. I mean, why they don't. I mean, I recognize that they feel it's a bulwark against their enemies. Anyone who develops a nuclear weapon, you're going to think twice about invading Pakistan or India or, France or, England or any of the other nuclear members of the nuclear club, which seems to be growing daily. So I get that impulse, Ted, but isn't it wiser, cheaper? You can use that money for other purposes to not develop a program. So, I mean, it seems to me Iran has a wonderful tool here for negotiations to kind of immerse them in the Western world by saying, okay, we'll give it up, but you have to give us A, B, and C. You have to give us development money. You have to, promise and have as much as the promises are worth. But promise.
Well, that's the problem, right? I mean, it is complicated. So let's go back a little bit, right? So in 1979 was the Islamic Revolution that overthrew the Shah of Iran. The Shah was, of course, a close U.S. ally, and we even admitted that us admitting the deposed Shah to the United States for medical treatment was what sparked the takeover of the hostage of the U.S. Embassy in Tehran for 444 days.
In the hostage crisis,
in the hostage crisis, and all the sanctions that have followed, and the breakdown of diplomatic relations, and the fact that Iran has basically been an enemy of the U.S. ever since. The Iranians have been subject to grueling, really rough sanctions, and unlike, they haven't been able to roll with the punches the way that the Russians have after Ukraine. The sanctions turned out not to really have much of an effect on the Russians, especially because they were able to find new, greener pastures with their new Chinese friends. But like that's, Iran, for a myriad of reasons, wasn't able to pull that same trick. The Iranians, when they had their revolution, they inherited a number of treaty obligations from the previous regime, and under international law and under diplomatic tradition, even after a revolution, very often the revolutionary government will adhere to their international obligations that were signed by previous regimes. And Iran was no exception. The Islamic government agreed to maintain the Shah's obligations under the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. This was a voluntary thing. It's not like Iran did anything wrong, lost a war, had to agree to this. They agreed to do it. They didn't want. In fact, the Ayatollah Khomeini actually signed a fatwa that was renewed by Khamenei against nuclear weapons, declaring them un-Islamic. So this is something that the Iranians say, and I think with some credibility to those of us who do believe them, that they don't really want nuclear weapons. I mean, there's a big difference between nuclear power and nuclear weapons, right? So you need to achieve nuclear power, you need to enrich to about 3.4%. To have a weapons grade plutonium, you need to be at over 90%. The assessment of the U.S. intelligence community, as articulated by Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard, is that they are at about 60%. It is their assessment of the CIA and the NSA and other intelligence groups that Iran does not have nor is seeking nuclear weapons. That is the current official position of the United States government. The Israelis are pissed. They say they're really afraid that Tehran's going to develop a nuke and fire it at them. I mean, that presupposes that they're going to do it anytime soon. It presupposes that if they had one or two nukes, they would spend it that way rather than just hold on to it. And it sort of ignores the real reason that the Israelis hate the Iranians, which is the Iranians' proxies. I mean,
yes,
which is mainly Hezbollah, which has been terribly degraded by the Israelis after the pager bombings and all that stuff. And Hamas, much less of a proxy than Hezbollah, but still with friendly relations with Iran. And the former Syrian government of Bashar al-Assad, who is, of course, no more and has now been replaced by a guy who basically was a member of Al-Qaeda and ISIS. So I don't know why the Israelis want to have him there, but okay, you guys do you. And of course the Houthis, but the Houthis haven't really done much specifically to the Israelis, but it's still part of the quote unquote axis of resistance. So the Israelis, I think with some justification, fear Iran as sort of a general noxious anti-Israeli presence in the Middle East, I think is the best way to put it. And so they want them out. And, I don't think they have given much thought to what would follow.
Well, that's a big question. I wanted to follow up on what you're discussing here, and that is what happens. Let's assume for a moment they get Khamenei to leave and go back, assuming they held on to the lease from Khomeini's time in Paris. And so he can go back to the apartment there. And what does regime change in Iran look like? What would it look like currently? And I don't know that they would like the results. Could potentially be the people in positions to move up are far less moderating than the current leadership of Iran, is my understanding. Now that, I wanted to go back. You said you wanted to go back. Let's go way back, Ted. Let's take the way back machine one more time, back to the wars of the United States. Okay, let's rank them and say who won. Okay, and then believe it or not, it's not a short list because apparently it's what we do.
It's not a short list.
Okay, but the first one, Revolutionary War. I'd say that's a win. We
won. We're here.
We won. Yeah, here we are.
Yeah.
War of 1812. We lost everything except for a battle that was fought 2 weeks after an armistice was signed. So that was
the White House burned.
The White House and the Capitol building. Far less. And people really didn't care much about that.
Would you say that was fought to a draw, kind of?
I'd say they had to. I think the British. It reminds me a lot. This is okay. Stay with me, guys. That war reminds me a lot of the Ukraine war, in that Britain thought, okay, we're going to go there and we're going to teach those Yanks a lesson. But the fact is, they landed in the southern states, started going up, got to Washington, D.C., burned the Capitol, and that they started moving north and were facing zero resistance. And they thought it was a trick. Little did they know at the time.
This is too easy.
This is too easy.
Yeah.
And they stopped. And American forces were able to, right themselves a little bit. It also tells you what a shitty leader Madison was. But I don't have a lot of, I'm not a big fan of little Maddie, as they called him, our shortest president. Okay, next war after War of 1812, the Mexican-American War. I'd say we won it because we ended up in Mexico City.
Yeah. And we captured some territory, didn't we?
Well, they ceded territory to us, certainly. After they not just the annex, we were able to annex Texas, which was part of James K. Polk's platform when he ran. James K. Polk, one of the most underrated American presidents, in my view. And it also ceded us the Southwest, gave us Southern California, gave us Mexico, New Mexico, and Arizona, such as they are. Okay, so the Mexican-American War. Now comes the big one, Ted, the Civil War. Who won that? You're in New York. I'm in Alabama. We may have different views on this one.
Well, I would say, I don't know if
I'd say the right side won.
I would say the Civil War doesn't really count as a win because it's not a foreign war by definition. So we should just skip over that one. We just beat the shit out of ourselves.
Yeah, it was the bloodiest conflict in American history, and then we actually didn't have a war for a while. And we were I imagine Americans were probably thinking, "This is nice. This is pretty great. We haven't done this for 25 years, and the economy's growing. The country's growing. I feel good about myself as a person." And then God help us that we couldn't help ourselves. The Spanish-American War, which McKinley did not want. It's really, really interesting how he fought tooth and nail against getting involved in that. And
William Randolph Hearst
and Pulitzer are both pushing hard for it because they wanted to sell newspapers. And so they got us into it. It was a fairly quick war. We ended up with the Philippines and Cuba.
And Guam.
Well, and we still have Guam. God bless them. But the Philippines, the people there had been fighting a civil war.
Little nibble off of Cuba. We saw Guantanamo Bay.
We do. But neither of those countries really wanted us to be there. And we couldn't understand it. Why? Why don't you want us here? We're so awesome, which is what the British were saying in the 1700s. We're so awesome. Why would you not want to be a part of this? But they eventually. So I'd say we won the war, but America wins a lot of wars.
We won the Spanish-American War. Clearly.
We won, but we didn't necessarily win the peace. Imperialism turned out to not be so great.
Well, that's the war that starts us off on our present course.
Yes. So, okay. And there's other conflicts we're not going to touch on because there's a bunch of little ones.
No, there's literally hundreds. Yeah. I mean,
we invaded Haiti like every other week for a while.
These are the big ones. Yeah.
So World War I. I mean, we were on the winning side, but that was not a win.
Well, why do you say it's not a win?
Because that's what I just said. You might win the battles, but you don't win the peace. And we didn't win the peace because it didn't hold together very much or very well or for very long. So I'd say that was a loss. World War II, big win. That's a big check in the win column.
It's the mother of all victories for the U.S. Yeah.
Well, then things get a little.
I mean, the thing about World War I is we were on the winning team, but we didn't really come away with any booty, right?
No, we came away with what Wilson wanted, which was prestige. We clearly established ourselves as, if not certainly one of the top 2 or 3 players in the world stage. Wilson goes to Versailles and creates that.
Hey, long-time listener points out important point. We skipped over the Indian Wars.
Well, I was going to say those. I'm rolling those into the smaller wars because they were little engagements. The things like I'm not going to throw in Grenada,
but obviously we won those.
Well,
we murdered them. We slaughtered them.
Well, it comes back to another podcast we should have talking about the presidents and which ones we loathe and which ones we love. And the loathiest of the loathsome is Andrew Jackson, in my view. He was
not far behind as Van Buren, I would say.
Yeah, Van Buren just did what he was told, and it was obviously Jackson's vice president. But what's curious is that one of my favorite presidents, Polk, was a minion, a creature of Andrew Jackson. But the guy ran for one term, said what he was going to do, got elected, did what he said he was going to do, and then went back home.
All right, Scott, it's 1945. Let's go. Let's keep going with the war.
Okay, things are looking pretty bleak for the United States now. We go to Korea, that's a tie. We go to Vietnam, that's a loss. I guess if you want small, it's small-ish, but the Kuwait War, that's a win. We won. But then the Afghanistan/Iraq wars lasted 20 goddamn years. We lost. We're still in Iraq. Our presence there is. I'm not sure how that's.
I think we kind of lost Somalia, if you want to count that one.
Did we? I mean, we're not really there either. I mean,
yeah, but they kicked our ass.
Well, we get kicked out. We get our asses kicked a lot. We go into Beirut and we're going to maintain order with Marines. Whoopsies,
And so that brings us to the present day.
Yeah, the Afghanistan war lost. Iraq, I don't know. I chalk that up to like a weird tie-ish loss thing.
You think Iraq is a defeat.
Well, we're still there though.
Right, but it was a defeat. I mean, the point is that American prestige was horribly damaged. I mean, it didn't, and not to mention, what was our war aim, right? Our war aim was to establish a puppet regime in Iraq, which we didn't do. We have to share it with the Iranians.
So now that's where brings us up to date. bombing. We've had Kosovo and that was a air war, which I hate because
which is what this is going to be.
Yeah. And I hate
which is what it is now because of the geography. The two countries aren't contiguous. You can't pass through Jordan, let's say, to get to between each other. So, it's going to be an air war. It is an air war,
which is because it's so sterile. It's not. That's what was my complaint about Kosovo and the victory there, and it was a victory. We did get Serbia to back down, but only after we actually started bombing, Serbia, and the Serbian people started paying a price for killing, genocide in the region. You're right, Ted. This is going to be a, and I hate air wars because there's no blood. There's no boots on the ground. There's no skin in the game. I can't think of any other cliches, but it's this. And you're right. It's going to be, they're going to throw bombs at each other. And at the end of the day, Ted, what's going to be resolved? Absolutely fucking nothing. And they're going to go back to their corners. They're going to continue to snarl at each other. They're going to continue. Iran and Israel. And if the United States joins in, well, we've just opened the door. We've just said we are willing to bomb a foreign country, which to my mind, Ted, tells me, well, then they can come here and bomb us. And how can you possibly say, let's say an Iranian, I love how they're already, the right-wing press is already talking about, well, there's possible sleeper cells in the Iranian sleeper cells in the United States. Yeah. That's those come from states where pot's legal. Yeah. Of course it's not. I mean, it's just, but Ted, what's at that point? What's to prevent them? Why wouldn't you? If they dropped a bomb, if Iranian forces, either their Air Force or a drone, flew into the White House and killed President Trump and Vice President Vance and much of the cabinet, then you can go and you can bomb the living hell out of Iran and do what you got to. Oh God, we have President Johnson. Oh my God. Anyway, I do not like or respect the current Speaker of the House. Anyway, so where does this lead to? What does victory look like? And what I guess stopping the nuclear program. Well, we'd done that. We had certainly slowed it down significantly under President Obama. They had an agreement that President Trump, when he took office, quickly tore up. It was
which right now, he would love to have back.
Well, it sounds like he's negotiating to get it back. I mean, it sounds the terms.
Pretty much, that's right.
Although, with Trump, this terms changed on an hourly basis.
By the way, if I'm the Iranians, I am so escalating that nuclear weapons program that whether I had one or not, I want one now.
Well, they have one. There's
one now. North Korea doesn't get fucked with because they have nukes. Libya, Gaddafi got a bayonet up his ass because he didn't develop. He signed a nuclear deal with Bush. Should not have disarmed. If Assad had nukes, he would not have been ousted in a joint U.S.-Israeli, ISIS coup. It's insurance, it's protection. Saddam Hussein, twisting on the devil's fork right now, I'm sure is
kicking himself for not having weapons of mass destruction.
Exactly.
What was I thinking?
Right.
So so going forward, looking over the next 2 weeks,
we should talk a little bit about what's happening in the next 2 weeks. So the New York Times has a funny piece today where they said that 2 weeks is Donald Trump's favorite time increment. Everything is always 2 weeks, like on tariffs and everything else. I'll decide in 2 weeks. Anyway, so he has announced that within the next 2 weeks, he will decide whether or not to accede, in particular, to Israel's request that we drop a 30,000-pound bunker buster bomb on that deep mountain.
Which would be ineffective, by the way, just to be clear.
Nuclear project. You don't think it would work?
No.
You think it's so far deep it just wouldn't work?
Yeah. They're not, Iranians and our Persian friends, they're not idiots. They know we have a bunker buster. They know Israel some by hook or by crook will have access to that. And so, yeah, I can't imagine that this would be effective. Can you?
I would think I got to say though, I think I've overestimated Iran's military prowess. They weren't able to successfully control their own airspace. And I know that they have a lot of outdated fighter jets that they inherited from the Shah, and they've had a hard time, supplying them with replacement parts due to sanctions and just because they're old. But they have, the Israelis are flying around and doing whatever the fuck they want in Iran. So, maybe the Iranians aren't that smart. Maybe they fucking didn't build it deep enough into the ground.
Okay, but let's say we drop it. Okay, I'm sorry. I stopped. I interrupted. I apologize. We drop it.
Go ahead. Yep.
What happens then?
Well, there's a two-part question. A, it works. B, it doesn't work. Let's just assume it works. The Iranians can start from scratch. They can rebuild. They have other facilities that we no doubt don't know about. It's a modern country, and they have a relationship, an economic relationship with Russia and China. They can get supplies elsewhere. So they start from scratch. That's all.
How big? Just real quick for myself. I have a vague idea, but you could probably answer this quickly. What is the size of Iran? If you had to compare it to something, what is it comparable to?
You mean geographically?
Yeah.
That's a good question. It's big. If I had to guess, I would say I'm going to look this up while we're talking, but I bet it's about a fifth or so of the size of the continental United States.
I'd say it's bigger. I'd almost say it's probably a quarter, but yeah, go ahead. It's so they could potentially just move, and they have allegedly. The centrifuges are all over the country, and it's a big country. And stuff isn't that, and we tend to think that that's not a big deal. It's still, it is. The geographic size is a significant factor in whether or not you're going to invade somewhere. It's bigger than Iraq, if I'm remembering correctly.
All right. So actually, so the lower 48 states. So I'm right. Iran's about a fifth the size of the contiguous 48 states. It's slightly larger than Alaska, but smaller than Texas, than the combined area. Of Texas and California.
Okay.
So that kind of gives you a good sense. It's a big ass country. Alaska's vast.
So tactically, what we're also talking about here is, anything other than bombing, any kind of invasion is going to be almost impossible.
No, an invasion's impossible. It's too big. The U.S. never occupied. Afghanistan's much smaller than. It's not a small country, but it's much smaller than Iran. We never occupied Afghanistan. Afghanistan was. We installed. Karzai was the mayor of Kabul, we called him. And basically, at its peak, the central government in Kabul under U.S. occupation only controlled the inner parts of 5 major cities, right? Cities like Herat and Kabul and Mazar-e-Sharif. And the whole 95% of the rest of the country was completely Taliban controlled the entire time. The ruling elites hopscotched by plane from like one city to the next. They never ever went on the highways. Iraq is the same thing. We never really occupied Iraq in the same way. You just couldn't. So Iran, we had a land border to cross in terms of Iraq. We crossed from Kuwait across the berm. That's, Afghanistan was a little harder because it's landlocked, but still, it's just not going to work.
So 2 weeks from now, are we looking at Taco Trump? Are we looking at, is he going to back down? Is he going to declare victory and walk away regardless of what happens, which is kind of his MO? I don't know. Good point. The U.S. does not have the ability to have a naval landing, so it would have to be airdrop. It gets messy.
Now here's a question. Peter is asking, what if we drop the bunker buster on Khamenei, destroying much of Tehran? Well, okay, I don't see that happening. I don't
Well, he's not there anyway. He's in, and you pronounce it better than
he's in Qum. But
He's in
also,
Qum.
I mean, the point is, I don't see us doing that. That would basically, I mean, this is basically like a mini nuclear weapon. When I was in Afghanistan in 2001, they dropped one of these things, a slightly smaller one, that I felt 26 miles away. I thought there had been a nuclear weapon detonated, and this is a bigger one. It would be a spectacular war crime. And so, I don't know. Yeah.
Well, it also begs, okay, side issue, Ted. Side conference. Over here. Come here. Ted. Come here. In terms of war, there are people, especially MAGA, who are saying that he has to declare war, or at least ask congressional approval for this action. I don't think he does. I mean, I just listed a list of wars. None of them were declared wars. Korea, Vietnam, Afghanistan. None of these were declared wars in the constitutional sense.
No, they were not. The last time we've had a formal declaration of war was after Pearl Harbor in 1941. But I mean but all of the conflicts you've talked about were authorized by had an authorization to use military force or something like it. After in 1964 there was the Tonkin Gulf Resolution. Based on lies and based on an incident that never occurred, of course. There was the authorization to use military force after 9/11, which was then expanded for use against Afghanistan, which granted had nothing to do with 9/11. And then Iraq, which also had nothing to do with 9/11, but whatever. And some scholars, Republican scholars, actually argue that it never went away, that basically any president can just say, hey, if there's terror, folks, that 2001 AUMF works. I think that's some pretty weak tea. But there's been some noise in both houses by both Democrats and Republicans saying that they would like to have a say on whether this happens, that basically the Congress should have to sign off before we do something this momentous. Scott, you remember 2002, you and I were at odds over the buildup to the invasion of Iraq. And you've since changed your mind, and you said it many times that it was a mistake, that we shouldn't have done it. But during that entire year, there was a huge propaganda push on the part of the Bush administration, their allies in the news media, and even democratically aligned media to push for this war. I mean, there was the New York Times with Judith Miller and all those people.
Who's your favorite? Your favorite? The World is Flat author. What's his name? Oh
yes, the brilliantly gifted Thomas Friedman / sarcasm. So all those people were pushing for war in a big way. Bill Maher, all of them. And there was this huge propaganda push. We're not seeing that now at all. Okay. I mean, Trump's not pushing. He's not making the case. He's not sending Secretary of State Rubio to the UN with vials of mystery powder saying hey, we're going to be, the Iranians are going to do this, they're going to do that. The media is not part of some kind of full push. Yeah, you've got random neocons like, Bill Kristol saying, yeah, we should do this, all the usual suspects, but you just don't have that push. Scott, I think this would be the first time in my lifetime that there would be a propaganda push for war, or I should say a push for war that belongs entirely to one man, Donald J. Trump. If he does this, it's all on him. I mean, even the Republican Party they're not really attached to it. It's really just him.
Yeah, that's a great point. And we were talking on the phone the other day, and you brought this up, and it really got me to thinking, has there ever been anything quite like this? And I would say that, the invasion of Panama, for instance, was that, but there was some propaganda buildup for that. Was there propaganda buildup for the invasion of Grenada? I don't remember that.
There was. It wasn't
It wasn't like a full, blood in
scattershot.
the. Yeah, it wasn't a blood in the face. War, let's go, kind of a thing. But yeah, you're right.
I remember it was like our sacred medical students are in dire danger from the evil Marxists and their Cuban construction worker allies.
Could you? We dare defend our 5th tier medical students.
I remember when they got off the plane. I think it was on at Islip Airport in Long Island, and they all had this. They were interviewed by the media. It's like, "Are you glad to be home?" And they were like, "We don't know what's going on. Why are we here? Why were there U.S. troops? Nothing was happening."
So I'm not, boy, why, what do you, I mean, I just think this is, you and I, and like I said, we talked about it a day or two ago. And my take was, this is just Donald Trump being Donald Trump. And this is him saying, I can shoot someone on 5th Avenue and get away with it. And he's not wrong. I mean, I think he can get away with pulling this off. If indeed it happens, and dropping the big old bomb. And what are they going to do? You got a Congress that's inept now. You got a Congress that's impotent. I mean, you've got a Congress that they can bitch and moan all they want now, but the fact that they ceded the one constitutional authority that was always theirs in terms of controlling the purse strings, and they just didn't give a shit and let Trump declare tariffs and taxes and tax breaks and all this other stuff. This is that. Now they're going to grow some balls. Really? Now? Versus, when they shoulda, coulda, and didn't. So where does this lead to, Ted? I'm still kind of flummoxed. I don't know.
Well, I don't know either. I mean, I think there's a general assumption by people like you and me that this is a foregone conclusion. It's gonna happen. And I don't know that that's true. We should talk a little bit about this, right? If you're Donald Trump or you're advising Donald Trump, what is he weighing, right? Like, what are the pros and cons? Let's go through them. Okay, so the advantage of doing this is militaristic FOMO, right? What if the Israelis win a glorious victory and somehow we're not involved, or I'm not involved, me, Donald Trump? That would make me sad. There's also the desire to, he's a Zionist. He's pro-Israel. He's, had a close relationship with Israel for a long time. You always want to make your ally happy. And you might think that you might also be thinking for real that you're neutralizing an American adversary in Iran. I think those are basically all the pros. Am I missing anything, do you think?
No, I think your first point off the bat, that this is like where they're doing it, they're being successful. I could do that. I could be a wartime president. Mm-hmm. I think you and I both kind of talked about, like I said, we talked about it earlier, and we both kind of went, yeah, this kind of feels like, well, they're doing it. All the cool kids are doing it.
Yeah.
Why don't we?
I don't think he was into this. He told Bibi not to do it until the Israelis had some success, maybe some more success than either of us would have thought. Interestingly, the Israelis, just parenthetically, they outperformed in terms of their ability to command Iranian airspace, but they've got a problem I wouldn't have anticipated, which is they don't have that many missiles to fire at Iran. They don't have really any more than the Iranians do. So both sides are going to run out of missiles. And it is an air war. It's a missile war. So that's interesting. But I think the point is Trump saw the success, and there was a lot of thought that, this would be more damaging to Israel than it was. And then he's like, oh, I want me part of that. Let's go through the cons, Scott. So the polls show that the vast majority of the American public, including Republicans, do not want to go to war on the side of Israel against Iran. Polls also show that public approval of Israel is at a rock bottom, lowest ever in the history of polling, and after the Gaza situation. So that also, to me, if I'm Trump, it's like, I don't know if I want to get in bed with the Israelis at this point. There's also a huge schism within MAGA world between the populist, nationalist, America firster, who basically just descended from Pat Buchanan, and they don't like this. Like, Americans are suffering. We have expenses here at home. Inflation's high. We didn't elect you to do this. We elected you to secure the border and to get prices down.
Right.
And this seems to us like a distraction from those things that we voted for you to do. So from a polling perspective, and Trump's not stupid. He also knows that, like, the Bush administration basically ended in disaster because of the Iraq War. Wars can really fuck up your presidency. And he must not want that. So there's a lot of cons here, not to mention, geopolitically, who knows what happens next, right? Like, let's say you do topple the government. Well, there's nothing, what comes next? No one knows. And, the history of that is not good. Syria is not better now than it was under Assad.
Is it not?
Libya is certainly not better now than it was under Gaddafi. It's a failed state. Libya had the highest literacy rate in all of Africa. Now it's a failed state with slave auctions. Syria is now run by Al Qaeda and ISIS.
He disowned. I thought the guy who led that the movement to overthrow had actually
he's
disowned.
Kind of crossing his fingers behind his back, though.
Well, maybe just playing everybody.
My point is that Iraq obviously became a shit show after 2003. Sectarian violence, civil war. It's really not resolved. So Afghanistan, we didn't do any good there either.
So if this is all about Trump's legacy, which some people are saying that's kind of where he shifted his focus because he knows he can't run for a third term. This seems to be out of character for Trump looking for legacy. He has done things like, look at his vice president. Vance is a very young guy. His judicial appointments are pretty young for the most part. His appointments to other boards and other bureaucratic organizations, young. He's looking for legacy. I think that's
absolutely
that's true. This doesn't do that. All of the things and he's not unaware of all the things you've just mentioned. Surely he saw what happened with George W. Bush. He talked about it.
And he ran against it in the 2016 primaries. This was a Republican conservative running against neoconservative interventionism in a Republican primary successfully.
And I've mentioned several times before, and Ted laughs at me, but I'm self-aware enough to know that if I was a 1930s Republican, I would have been an isolationist. I would have said, fuck the rest of the world. Look what happened when we got involved in World War I. I'm just reading what
keep talking.
Long-time listener says. Where was I going with this? I was just saying that, I would have in 1930s, I would have been an isolationist Republican. It's really, simply put, I would have been, just America has all the raw materials, especially back then, had all the raw materials, had the industrial base. We didn't need the rest of the world. We weren't selling to them. They weren't selling to us particularly. So screw them, Europe's busting into another war. Well, that's what those people do. Fuck them. I really would have been that guy. And then on December 8th, I would have been very different.
Well, so let's talk. I do want to pursue that, but let's put Trump to bed right now. Okay. So if you're, 51-49, I'm not going out on a limb here. I don't think Trump's going to do it.
No, I think he's going to taco out, and Trump always caves. What is that? No, I can't remember what it means. Trump always
chickens out.
Chickens out. That's it. Yeah, always chickens out. Yeah, and I think he's going to chicken out. He's not going to chicken out. I think that the right decision is not to engage. Iran will give him a bone of some kind, and he'll wave it in the air and declare victory.
Although right now there's no. By the way, there had been reporting that the Israelis had killed Iran's chief negotiator, but actually he's alive and well. Israel has a way of killing people over and over again, so you never know. So it's not as bad as remember how we were always killing the number 2 in Al Qaeda? over and over and over.
Well, it was got to be a joke. It was one of those, what if, oh my God, congratulations, you are now new number 2 for Al Qaeda. Shit.
So all right, so that's
my prediction. I'm with you. I think it's even further apart. I think it's 60-40 that he will indeed find a way to walk away with his head held high.
And frankly, okay, listen, as someone who is against this idea of U.S. involvement on the side of Israel against Iran, let's not call the president a wuss when he wusses out. Seriously, I'm not kidding. Let's congratulate him.
You're right.
And thank him for doing the right thing by not doing the wrong thing.
There you go.
Let's do that. All right. So
agreed.
That's my pledge here. People can play this back at me if I break it, which I surely will. Okay. So let's talk about you, Scott, though. I mean, so people who are not following this, who are just tuning in, you may or may not know, Scott is a longtime supporter of Israel, which, by the way, I don't even understand really why, because you're not Jewish, and it's like, why do you care? But you're you're a big supporter of Israel, not so much of Prime Minister Netanyahu or his government
or the coalition.
So how do you feel from a pro-Israel point of view about attacking Iran?
It seems a distraction. It seems an obvious one. What's happening in Gaza, the continued, frankly, there's many of us who support Israel who now see that it's time to end that, time to end the operation, time to go create a Marshall Plan to rebuild Gaza and seriously negotiate with the Palestinians about creating a real Palestinian state and a sustainable one. And also, obviously, what's happening in southern Lebanon with the battle against Hezbollah, the continued incursion in West Bank, all of which has to be resolved going forward. And so all of that really makes them look, I mean, for a lack of a better word, and I hate to make it sound like it's all cosmetic because it's not. But like you said, its ratings, Israel's position in the United States and across the globe has just been decimated.
They obviously don't care.
I think they care, and that's why the attack on Iran. You have a state that is beloved by very few, and so you can attack them.
Iran.
Yeah, Iran, and claim that they are.
I think Iran's more popular than Israel these days.
I think you may be right. I think you may be right. So that's where
the Middle East, man. I mean, Iran's biggest problem is this whole Shia Sunni divide that they're on the wrong side of, and they finally, are able to say to the Arab street, while your governments are talking a good game against the Zionist entity, we're out there kicking taking our lumps, and and we're at war with them, and we're bombing Tel Aviv. What are you Saudi and Omani and UAE and Emirati fucks doing? We're on top of it.
Yeah. And so, like you said, and Israel's getting away with it right now. And I think they care. I do think they care about what the United States thinks. They used to care what the United Nations thinks. They don't seem to care about that anymore.
Well, because the U.S. always just runs interference for them in the Security Council and vetoes all the resolutions.
So going forward, I mean, my view is surprise, and also that
the king of Israel, you would have direct lineage from David. What do you do? I mean, I think this is about Netanyahu completely, and it's about wiping Gaza off the front page, because that's really bad for him and for Israel in that order. And it's about, domestic consumption to keep Israel on a constantly expanding war footing so that there's no talk about restoring normalcy and maybe getting back to court about all his corruption charges.
Oh, well, it's self-defense. You've talked about Trump, Trump running in 24. He was running to stay out of jail.
Yeah.
I think that is absolutely huge. So, okay. So, I mean, and let me turn the question over to you, and I got to take a step away for a second, but as someone who does not support Israel, you explain to me what the next, you kind of already said, and what their next steps are. Let's say the next 2 weeks and Trump says, okay, we're done. Do they continue the assault on Iran? Do they move into Syria? Do they move into Lebanon and take over all of that. I mean, there's so much that could happen now. And the next month is going to be a mess. And Israel is going to make it messy. So, Ted, what do you think is going to happen?
I'll take them one at a time in reverse order, as is my want. So basically, in terms of what's going on in Lebanon, Israel can come and go as they please, especially after they decimated Hezbollah. And they do come and go as they please. They've done it a number of times over the years, and they've effectively seized a buffer zone in southern Lebanon, south of this key river there. I forget, the name escapes me right now. And then also they've seized a buffer zone in inside Syria. It's Syrian territory. They've invaded it and occupied it, but they call it a buffer zone. And effectively, the Golan Heights is effectively a buffer zone as well. That's directly occupied. They're probably not going to give that territory up anytime soon. I don't think, however, that this is that Israel's goal or Benjamin Netanyahu's goal is about territorial expansion. I think the goal here is to besides distracting the world from what's going on with Gaza and with his own domestic political concerns, Netanyahu is also deeply concerned about the situation in Iran, and like whether he can degrade their ability to strike Israel or any friendly targets. So this is about degrading Iran's infrastructure, bombing their airports, bombing their power facilities, just decimating their grid, harming their economy even further than it has been. That will score some domestic political points among a public that's been radicalized by the October 7th attack. And I think, fundamentally, that's where we're at. Scott, are you back yet? I've filled up as much space as I can here.
I have returned.
Okay, there we go. I just want to point out that we're color coded in a remarkable way here. You in the red and me in the blue today. We're not going to do that regularly. Whose flag is that behind you?
That's Lithuania. My soon to be new. Should I talk about this?
You can.
Briefly?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then we got to go.
I have applied for, and it looks like it's going the way I had hoped it would go. I have applied for Lithuanian citizenship. My grandfather was born in Lithuania, immigrated to the United States with his mother. And I just got an email late last week that both my great-grandmother and my grandfather, the records are that they were indeed citizens of the Lithuanian Republic, which was survived as we developed following the Versailles Treaty. And it was created in 1920, an independent Lithuania, and lasted until the Russians showed up again. They keep showing up, Ted. They just kind of show up.
They do.
And then looking at what's been happening in the world, what's happening here in the United States, given the fact that I have done cartoons and commentary and a podcast opposing the Trump administration, and apparently that now is becoming more and more an issue and a reason to get arrested and possibly even deported. So if I'm going to get deported, I want to have an EU passport so I can be deported to someplace nice like the south of France or Tuscany or, Croatia, perhaps. And that's the reason I'm doing it. So I will keep you guys posted. But as it stands right now, things are looking good. Where the archivists are going to try and nail all of the information down. And after that, then I go and talk to the council in Lithuania. I don't speak much Lithuanian, so it's going to be, I hope they're not expecting me to come in and speak that.
Don't do that like East African clicking language thing, like.
Yeah, or just because everything has an is at the end of Lithuanian. So, hius, how are you-us? Don't do that. Like when Americans put an o at the end of words to make them sound Spanish. It's just
or like glory to Russia might not be also.
No.
Right.
What's funny is, Ted, I grew up hating Russians for that reason, because when they came into Lithuania, following the agreement with Hitler, and then the fall of, the end of the World War II, when they went back into the politics and took over again, they were brutal. and Lithuanians served as what's the word I'm looking for? Speed bumps in front of tanks. That was kind of their MO. Is I'm going to lie in front of a tank. And
Peter says my mom's piano teacher was the daughter of Smetona. I hope I'm not mispronouncing that too badly. President of Lithuania in the 1930s.
Oh my gosh,
he wasn't as bad as Hitler.
Okay.
So, and then
who was it?
Listeners pointing out that the Lithuanian government isn't going to like your association with Russian media.
I've been on it. That's all. What am I going to say? I mean, I believe in free speech. So if they don't like
much
that,
like
then...
Lithuania itself,
what's that?
Belief in free speech.
They believe in free speech. They're actually fairly democratic. The
right,
Baltic states.
Free speech, and we're going to leave that here.
Okay.
Give me your opinion about their flag.
It's okay. It's colorful. I like the colors, but they could do something better. And they have an alternate flag, which has Vitus, a knight, who has been on their flag. I think it's a better flag. It's more dramatic. It's a solid red.
What's the symbolism of these colors? Do you know?
Probably grain and green for
the forests of Lithuania.
Yeah. And the red is the blood of the patriots that flowed to defend it. It's that kind of stuff. What happens is they create the flag and then they create the story later. It's like, well, this was pretty at the time. What does it mean? Let me get back to you.
All right, Scott. I'm going to leave that there. Thank you so much. As always a pleasure. I'll talk to you offline very shortly. You are watching the DMZ America Podcast. Thanks all for joining us. Please follow, please like, please subscribe. It's very important, and you guys are awesome. Thanks for joining us. I keep thinking we should probably have a regular schedule, but I like this sort of, we just show up like they say in France, like a cheveux sur la soupe, like a hair on your soup. We just show up.
Okay. On that note, I'm going to need your help with the music for the outro. So
okay. All right, here we go.
You know when your part comes out.
I'm ready. All right, media assets, click in. All right, and off we go.
Whoa, bum, 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 bum. What is it good for?
Absolutely nothing.
Say it again, y'all. Whoa, bum, bum. What is it good for?
Absolutely nothing. Ooh. That was horrible. Bye, everyone.
Bye.